Welcome to Ojas Oasis. This is a place where you will learn how to optimize your body, mind, and spirit in ways you have longed for a long time, perhaps your entire life. Our mission is to help you cultivate, nourish, and protect your Ojas, your immunity, and inner peace. All right, we're back for take 2 of this conversation on a very windy day in Boulder where the internet went out and we were trying to record this about 1 or 2 hours ago. No, like an hour ago. But you know what? We know when the planets are in retrograde, especially Mercury, and it's a windy day, that Rob and I were just saying we were not surprised when we got booted off, and happy that the stars are still obliging to allow us to have this conversation today, because we are ready. We are so ready to talk about this. And Rob Loud, I am happy to welcome you again to Ojas Oasis. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Of course.
All right. So, where we left off, or I should just say where we will begin again, is starting with how yoga found you or how you found yoga.
Yeah. I think, I guess, a bit of the backstory, and I'll try to keep it a little um, as simple as possible, as, there's a lot that happens in life, but really, the the easiest way to say it is yoga found me just because my life was sort of falling apart. It was sort of a hot mess kind of a situation, and born out of just a lot of trauma and drugs, alcohol addiction, as a means to sort of try to, cope. It was my only coping mechanism, but and it was sort of accidental, but a little bit of the backstory. Just grew up with a lot of sort of trauma in my life, just revolving around drugs, alcohol, and violence. I grew up in a household with a little bit of domestic violence involved, and drugs and alcohol was kind of a common theme, and really just had a hard time from the get go. I just never really felt safe as a kid. Just there was just a lot of, just being in survival mode, kind of. And by the time my mom eventually got sober, I was probably about the age of 13. And that's really where I sort of found drugs and alcohol as a means to cope with what was going on. And in the first time I really found found a way to check out, I fell in love with it and really was off to the races. And so for many years, just growing up, my formative years, and into being a young adult, I was sort of just checked out in a lot of ways, and I had a lot of my own anger issues, revolving around the two sort of male role models I had in my life, which weren't really good role models at all. But to kind of keep it simple, I had a few events in my life. One was in my early 20s when I got sober for the first time, which was about a 7-year run. And I ended up, just after I graduated college, I got jumped in an alley on the hill leaving a party, and ended up getting beat up in a really big way, where I got kicked and stomped in the head. Um, and the kid that did it, ran. I got really lucky that the police happened to show up. Nobody called. They just happened to be patrolling the hill, the college area in town in Boulder, and they just came across it happening. And the kid ran, and the kid fought with the cops. He went to jail, and ended up going to jail for 10 years himself. And I don't know really whatever happened to him, but that was an eye opener for me. I had a head injury that took a while to recover from, and some face stuff that was going on. But like, I'd say maybe within the year of that event happening, ended up getting sober because I just needed to. I could just tell that. In fact, when I was in the hospital, when I woke up, I had sort of this, and even though I didn't know anything about yoga or karma or anything, I had sort of this realization of karma while I was in the hospital. I recognized that even though I didn't, it was a random act of violence that had happened to me, that was really how I was living my life. Up until that point, because I did have a lot of anger issues. I did fight with people, not to that extent, but so I had to like just sort of assess my own life, and ended up getting sober, and in the process decided to start taking care of myself and running and just doing things to try to, reclaim my physical health. And part of that was I found martial arts, so Brazilian jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai. It's a, kickboxing, and really leaned into it as a means to sort of stay healthy. It held me accountable. I trained every day back then, like I practice yoga now. And but I still had a lot of mental afflictions that were, I was depressed all the time, and I started to have sort of panic attacks. Not sort of, I had full blown panic attacks quite a bit. And so it was just a lot of trauma. My nervous system wasn't able to regulate itself. And so I took a lot of prescribed medications while I got sober, and really leaned into just the physicality of what I was doing as a means to like keep me on track. During that time, I had a really sort of crazy experience, which was sort of the second experience. But I had met a person, a woman who was like an energy healer, and we ended up dating for a while. But when I first met her, she did like Reiki, and she was like, "Let me do a session on you." And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, this was so out of the wheelhouse of what I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna see what happens here. And I went, and she did like an energy session on me, um and I was like, this is weird. I mean, I could kind of feel something happening, but nothing profound when she did the work. But within like a week of that energy work that she had given me, and we were hanging out some at a restaurant in downtown Boulder, and I was having this sort of, um, I couldn't really describe it. The way I described it to her at the time was, I told her I felt like I was on the verge of having an epiphany of some sort, and I didn't know what it meant or what it was. And the next day, my whole life changed. So everything like sort of exploded in a good way. I had this, what like looking back in hindsight would was a Kundalini experience that I didn't know what was going on. But I've never been to church in my life. I never subscribed to a God at all. I was like sort of an atheist just by default. But all of a sudden, I felt like I knew what God was, and I thought I knew what the meaning of life was. And it was like, best way I could describe it back then was, it felt like I had won the lottery. I like knew all that was going on, and like, but some other people during this time, there's a I realized that there's a close relationship between some mental health, what some people say is a mental health crisis, and a spiritual experience, because it was very manic behavior that I started. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, I started talking about God a lot, and just had this download. And essentially, for, I don't know, I'd say approximately maybe 6 weeks, I just felt high as a kite. I was just going around trying to tell everybody about God. I was buying these books and giving them to people, and it was wild. It was like sort of the beginning for me. And then it came with a really, really hardcore depression. So I don't know if that's the manic depressive. It wasn't ever, I never got diagnosed with it. I never saw a doctor, but even my mom was freaked out. She thought I was like becoming schizophrenic or something. But there was points during this time where I felt like I was going to spontaneously combust, which is just an interesting thing to say. I thought I was going to burst into flames. I had like so much energy running through my body. And then it crashed and burned, and I went into this large scale depression that was like to as deep as far down as one can go, and I didn't know what was what, and I was still taking drugs to help, sort of prescription drugs that were prescribed to me, um, and essentially, um, during this time, I wasn't even really able to train the martial arts I was doing. I was just I couldn't even get out of bed, and I wasn't working at that point anymore, and trying to just figure out what was what. And I was still kind of going to a gym, and at that gym they had yoga in the basement of the gym every Wednesday night, or Wednesdays. And so I was like, I had some weird intuitive feeling that yoga might help me, aside from just like, I just was like, maybe this could help my depression. And so I started going once a week, and I did this for about a year, and I started to feel the benefits of just learning how to breathe. You know what I mean? And I put two and two together, that anytime I went to the hospital having a panic attack, thinking that I was dying, basically the people at the hospital were always telling me, breathe. You're not breathing, sir. Breathe, breathe. And I was always so upset. I was like, I am breathing. If I wasn't breathing, I would be dead. You know what I mean? And that, so, but I didn't realize that when I would go into the hospital, I was actually hyperventilating. It was like happening to me. And that's what happens when you have a panic attack. And so I saw sort of this um, relationship between breath and like what they were telling me at the hospital, and that what the yoga teacher at this gym was telling me, which was to breathe. And so my goal when I first started going to this guy, it was like he was an Ashtangi who just taught, and I just really liked. He was very calm, and one of the things I remember about going to his class was thinking, which was kind of funny. I was like, this guy never gets road rage, and that was just one of the things that popped into my mind, because I was a road rager. I would just get angry, and so I was just sort of caught by his presence. I was like, this guy is really calm, and it's not like somebody that I would ever like, excuse me, hang out around or be around. But there was something about his presence that kept me coming back week after week. And so I upped it from once a week to twice a week, and I started actually feeling good about myself. I was like, wow, still on, excuse me, I'm choking on something here, still on prescription drugs, but like starting to feel a little bit better. You know what I mean? And at this point, I had gotten another job by then, and I had decided that I wanted to, at some point, just find a yoga studio and make it a daily thing, because it was helping me so much. I was like, wow, there is something to this. I'm feeling the benefits. I don't feel like I want to kill myself. You know what I mean? And so I stumbled into where you took my class, the Yoga Pod, and this was in 2007, I guess, and just meandered in. And I was a lot heavier than I am now. I was just like, and I was like, I just want to do this. So I signed up and started going every day. And so I started a daily practice. And for about, I'd say, I don't know, maybe a month or two of my daily practice, I ended up falling off the wagon. I ended up drinking again. And then through this whole process, I had sort of like, the spiritual experience that I had, I started to have a like sort of, I don't want to say paranoid, but I just didn't like the idea of taking prescription drugs anymore. I had this whole big pharma thing, and I was like, big pharma is just trying to hold me down and keep me from, evolving and finding enlightenment and this, that, and the other, because I had started to read all these spiritual texts. And I fell off the wagon. I took myself off the prescription drugs I was on, and just was like going to just stop taking them. But one weekend, I basically just holed myself up in my house, and I got into a really bad way. I like fell off the wagon in a big, big way, to where um, if divine intervention wouldn't have come in, and I feel like me getting beat up, as horrible as that was divine intervention. It was the worst, one of the worst things that ever happened to me. But at the same time, looking back, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I didn't die. You know what I mean? And so, fast forward to this experience, I spent about like 3 or 4 days drinking myself to death just by myself with a big bottle of vodka, and getting all paranoid about like the government trying to like, I just basically got into one of those like, you know not in a good way. And I woke up one morning probably 3 or 4 days in, and just realized that I needed to get back on my prescription. Like I had like a moment of clarity where I was like, okay, this is not faring well for me. And I remember it. And I woke up just in a bad way, went downstairs, took this 1.75 handle of vodka, just drank straight out of the bottle, threw up in the sink, and then got in my truck to try to drive and get my prescription refilled. It was, I think, like a Monday morning or Tuesday morning, 9 a.m., rush hour traffic. It was a work day. I had a straight line to drive. It was Arapahoe Road. I lived on a 6th and Arapahoe. I needed to make it to 30th and Arapahoe, where there's a King Supers. And at 28th and Arapahoe, I passed out at the wheel and got into a huge car accident, ran a red light right in the middle of an big, busy intersection. And just like I woke up in the hospital that first time, didn't know what happened. I woke up in jail, didn't know what happened. And that was sort of, unfortunately, I had to detox from the drugs that I was legitimately detoxing off of in jail, and I ended up staying in jail. I I was there for a bit. Nobody got hurt, and that's the saving grace. Is like it was like a hard stop, because I honestly feel that it was like, had that not happened, had I somehow um, gotten my prescription or not, but not had some sort of intervention, I probably would have died like soon thereafter. I mean, I am fairly certain of it. So, anyways, I was in jail and spent some time there, and then got out on house arrest. And so the people at the Yoga Pod, who I'm still friends with now, like I was showing up every single day, and just like jazzed on life. And then all of a sudden, I just disappeared for a while, and they were like, "Where the hell did Rob go?" And so I come back a little bit later. So this is sort of where it all kind of unfolds. Is in the process, I asked the sheriff. I was on house arrest, so they put a GPS on my ankle, like a little ankle bracelet. And I lost my job, the job that I had gotten. I lost my girlfriend. I had to move out of my house because I didn't have a job or any money. And so I had to move in with my mom, who lived in Longmont. Um, and I was on house arrest at her house. But when you're on house arrest, and you don't have a job, you get to go out and like look for work. You have to. It wasn't as easy to just find jobs on the internet back then. Actually had to go in and apply to some places. And so I asked the sheriff. I was like, listen, like while I'm job searching, would you be okay with me going to yoga? And I remember the look on the guy's face. He was like, he was very perplexed, and I could tell he was like, didn't know what you. He was like, I don't see why not. We know where you are. And so thank God to this guy, sheriff, that like said I could continue to go to yoga even though I was on house arrest. So I show up weeks later with this GPS on my ankle, and I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to go anyways. Like, I don't care what people think about me. Like, this is the one thing in my life that is making me feel halfway like a human being right now. And so I was practicing with my GPS. I'd just go job search and then go do yoga. And the owners of the Yoga Pod, they basically were like, I was doing trade work back then at the yoga studio for free yoga. And I didn't even have time to do it, like, because I had so many like appointments and community service and probation meetings and all this, that, and the other. And they just said, listen, you don't need to do anything. You just keep showing up. Like, just keep coming to yoga, because they could tell that it was helping me. Um, so finally I get the thing off my ankle, and I'm still just practicing, and I don't have a job. I'm still living at my mom's house. From the outside looking in, I felt like a pretty much a piece of shit. Like, I mean, I didn't have a job, didn't have a girlfriend, living at my mom's house. I was in my early 30s. And I was like, but like, because I was going to yoga so much, I felt really, really good about it. I was like, felt great, better than I had ever felt in my life, really. And because I had so much time to practice at that point, I didn't have a job. I was just like, all right, I'll just go to yoga all the time. And so at some point, about 9 months in, I still hadn't gotten a job. And I had just a light bulb moment at the yoga studio where I was like, you know what? Like, this is what I need to do. Like, I need to like teach yoga, because if I could teach yoga, if I could somehow make it work, it's win-win. It's win-win for everybody, because I'll have to show up. I'll have some sort of accountability for myself, because you can't just show up and teach in a bad way. And down the line, there's a couple times even in the future where I kind of fell off again. But like, the light bulb moment went off, and I had no money, not really anything going on. But my mom, bless her soul, could see that, like, the light coming back in my eyes. Like, she could tell like it was working. And so I had mentioned that one of my favorite teachers was leading a teacher training. I had overheard him in the lobby just talking about it. We weren't even like friends or anything. I was just like fanboying him and just like, oh my God, this guy's speaking to me. And and so she just like she basically was like, listen, I can tell you're really jazzed up on yoga, and this is like something that's like helping you and helping you a lot. She's like, I'm going to give you this money for this teacher training. And yeah, she said, if I give you this money to do this, you better, and she said it just like this, you better fucking do something with it. And I was like, all right, boom, off to the races. So the universe sort of like helped me out there, and I ended up doing my first teacher training. And that was sort of the beginning. And with that teacher training, I knew from the get go, I was like, you know what? This is what I want to do. I want to do it full time. And I want to do it like, so that I can continue to practice. Because I realized anytime I stopped practicing at that point, something bad happened. You know what I mean? And so at that point, I did my first teacher training, and then I took about 16 weeks, about 4 months after, just did a donation based class, and just tried to get my skills honed in so that I could audition for my first gig as a teacher training, which was at the Yoga Pod. And then sort of from that point, that was where it all started. And then like, I was sort of off to the races as far as yoga is concerned. And it's been, almost 15 years now that I've been teaching, and I've been teaching full time ever since. And I've done like multiple trainings, and had multiple fallings off since then as well. I mean, I told you in that class, I mean, I'm 1,000 days sober again. This is the second time that I've made it, this far since I was 12 or 13 years old, with being completely sober. But what I did differently, you know, that this last time, is I really leaned into my meditation practice. I was like, all right, and I went to therapy too, and that was something that I never thought I needed, especially after I started doing yoga. I was like, well, I do yoga. I'm self-aware, svadhyaya. I self-study. I understand myself. I got a lot of trauma. This is why I act this way. But like, I had a falling off one time, about 3-ish years ago, where I was like, okay, like, I feel like I need more help than just yoga. Like, I need to like actually do some more work, and I need to commit to a meditation practice. And since that time, I actually have meditated every single day. I think I told you I haven't missed a day, and thousand days of meditation now, every single day. And it's really been like the next level game changer for me, the same as it was when I found yoga the first time. Even though it's not as a profound shift, and there's not like this kind of pink cloud that you ride on when you first start getting into yoga. And you go through that phase where you're like nothing else matters, and then at some point life you have to contend with life again. It's kind of like that. It's that profound, but it's much more subtle. Now I feel like, I'm more or less unshakable at this point. Knock on wood. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? I always have to be vigilant and like, you know, pay attention to what triggers me and all of this other stuff. But like, since that point, my life has, since this last time, I feel like I'm doing the yoga finally. Well, not just the big poses, and I like the big poses, and I've done it all of that stuff, but like I'm hitting the next level of the yoga practice, which is the later down limbs. I'm actually starting to sit and be still, and I don't practice as much asana as I used to, but I still do for routine maintenance. But like I feel like I'm in a place where I'm just being more still now. And so that's a lot. That was a lot, but like that's the gist of my story, and really is just a shitstorm of my life, just trauma after falling off, after things that just kind of pushed me. But like hindsight's always 2020. Looking back, the most traumatic things, which were getting beat up, and the other one was going to jail. That was a pretty traumatic experience, especially having to detox in jail from all of that stuff, which was like hard and felt kind of unsafe. I felt like I should have, had some medical attention while this was going on. But, I made it through. And now I'm like, this is, exactly what needed to happen. And I feel like it was supposed to happen this way. You know what I mean? And as you know, you've taken a few of my classes, I always speak to suffering. I say, because it's really what yoga is about. It's not about necessarily feeling good. It's about all the not feeling good and how you sort of show up in those moments. And so I'm a big proponent of talking about suffering. And I think that's one of the things that people appreciate about me, because even though my story is like unique to me, violence and drugs and alcohol, that's not everybody, but everybody's got that same story. We're all on the hero's journey as far as like having to contend with something in life and either having a sink or swim moment, you know what I mean? And so I'm able to speak to that firsthand. And I will say, it was through yoga and practicing mindfulness in and of itself that I was able to get off all the prescription drugs. And that I haven't been on prescription drugs in a really long time, but I was able to get past panic by not using drugs, by using the tools that I learned in yoga, which is being with bodily sensation and learning how to breathe without like just spiraling out, like you can feel it happening, and I would have to brace myself and just like be with it. And then finally they just stopped happening, like they just, I feel like I somehow got past it. But that's it, that, and now I just, I teach full time, and and I've had such an amazing journey teaching. I've led a lot of teacher trainings, taught at festivals. I have created other teachers. I get so many people that always tell me through messages and whatever, just how much what I say in my classes has changed their life. You know what I mean? And I usually don't get to talk like this much. This is why I love being able to talk to you, because if somebody's like, what's your story? I can be like, just listen to this, because this is how it happened. And like, I know that yoga and meditation and mindfulness works as a means to heal. I don't know the exact science, but the proof is in the pudding. I mean, I've lived it, and I know that it works. And this is why I do what I do. I know that any class I teach, there's the potential for somebody to be in that room that was just like me, having a rough go, trying to figure out what's what, and like making it feel okay for them to come back, even if they feel like shit, you know what I mean? And because I feel like so many people coming in, if it's just too much positivity in a yoga class, like if you're like going through the ringer like I was, you might not come back. You know what I mean? You might be like, this is not for me, because everybody's happy here and I'm not. But yeah, so that's it basically.
What a journey. I mean,
Yeah,
woo,
totally.
you've, you know, I don't think there's any coincidence to some of the best people and my favorite people have been through the most shit, have been through the most adversity. And you, the key word that you mentioned when you were talking about your childhood was that you were in survival mode. So, I mean, the science is out on this. On the data is showing like, when children have to live in an environment like that where their day-to-day safety is uncertain and there's domestic violence and drugs and alcohol around, and it creates such an unstable environment while you're developing things like your nervous system and your ability to regulate and your ability to digest food and convert that to healthy. Again, your nervous system, or the health of your nervous system, is based on your ability to digest food and convert that into strong cells that create that solidity and stability to feel strong in your body. So when that is not given to you, it's no surprise that you went this route with the drugs and alcohol to escape, because that was another way of surviving, right? Was to dissociate from the immediate reality that you were living in. And I'm glad you are talking about the need for authenticity in your yoga classes and speaking to the spectrum of human suffering that people are going through. Nobody knows what anyone else is going through. You have no idea. Even if it looks all good on the outside, you don't know what they're going home to, and you don't know how they grew up, and you don't know. Nobody knows what's going on in another person's head, what kind of thoughts they're thinking. Anyone can put up a smile and show up and make it all look fine on the surface, but truly, um, there's no one that doesn't have demons. And you alluded to that as well. We all have voices that lead us down spirals and various, unhealthy, potentially very unhealthy paths. And your journey, I feel like, is so worth sharing in the depth that you have. It's a beautiful, shining example of not only the strength of the human spirit and how you can overcome anything. I think it's important to understand that anyone is capable of healing, no matter how deep down that rabbit hole a person can go into the depths of, like, even suicidal ideation and feeling like you failed and you've completely messed up your life and there's no way back. There's always a way back. From the moment we incarnate, we come with our karmas from our past lives. We come with so many lessons. We're put into a set of circumstances that are perfect for our work, for our soul's work, and what we're supposed to become. And I believe the greatest healers and teachers are those souls who do incarnate into families with lots of generational trauma.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, I agree. Yeah, 100%.
so
Yeah, and on some level, it's interesting. Like the using drugs and alcohol for myself as a coping mechanism. It's funny because like I can look back and actually on some level say that, like, at a young age, that was like what I needed to be doing at that point in time, just to kind of save me. You know what I mean? It's a ridiculous
no,
thing to kind of
it
say,
no,
but
it
I
makes
feel
sense. It
like
makes sense.
it was the only thing that really, like, kept me from, like, just, you know what I mean? Like, it's just an interesting thing, and there's so many different ways in which, we all check out, whether it be food or television or whatever it is. I mean, we all have a way in which we sort of
Cope,
avoid looking
cope.
at coping and not looking at what needs to be looked at,
And
and
there is a survival, like escapism. There's a lot of different forms of addiction, right? Like drugs and alcohol are obviously, like, if that's what was around in your home, that was the
yeah,
okay, I guess that's what you do when you don't want to feel all the things. Okay, like
yeah,
that's your example, or that's what's available in your immediate space. Other people do different things. Other people have food as an addiction. Other people have porn is an addiction. Other people have,
Yeah.
I don't know, like self-harming,
Hmm.
self-mutilation, or,
100%.
and it can get dark because guess what? Like if a person is in an environment, especially a child is in an environment with enough traumatizing events, we can't expect kids to be able to, without any tools of a
Yeah.
healthy tools available to them or being taught to them. Of course that's what's going to happen. I mean, the trajectory of that child's life is going to most likely end up with a lot of, again, like just escaping reality in various
Yeah.
forms, and not being present in their body. And so coming to yoga the way that you did, um I do see that as, like, of course it was your dharma. It was all, I think it's all, it all served the teacher that you've become, and all the students now that you have, including myself, who come into your class and are able to receive the medicine of your having not only survived what you've been through, but alchemizing it and turning it into wisdom.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I feel lucky that I was so seemingly unlucky. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes it just takes that, I feel like, um, yeah, yeah, I, yeah, yeah, I think, life's humans, we're all bonded together through suffering. And, and this is why I love yoga so much, and in the Buddhist tradition as well, is it's just because it's a way in which to learn how to navigate that. You know what I mean? Aside from just like, working on, you know, enlightenment or just awakening or whatever it is that you're trying to find, just very, um, yeah, just real coping skills to be able to get through, your day or your week or your year or your life,
I
Um,
love that. And I love that you kind of just said, you alluded to the fact that it's not just about what you're learning about your own suffering, but how it connects us, because it does help you understand other people. That's what
yeah,
this also does.
100%.
It's like, how do we navigate our relationships? How do we navigate our past relationship traumas? How do we reconcile that we're all just human beings at different parts of our own journeys? And you just start to develop this compassion for all beings.
That's the word I was going to use there. Is it helps you cultivate compassion, because you're like, just like you said before, you really never know what somebody's going through on any given day, and yeah, I don't take it lightly that, I get to assist in other people's, suffering mitigation, or just learning how to how to be with it. Essentially, I like, Richard Freeman. I think he's the one who said, like, yoga is learning how to suffer with grace. Whether it be small scale or big scale, and we're that's never going to stop happening. Like, there's always going to be something, um, to contend with. So, yeah, and really, the mindfulness aspect and learning how to breathe for me really is what it was about. My nervous system was shot. I mean, I feel like it's just in the last few years, and I've been doing yoga asana for a long time now, that my nervous system is finally feels like it's at a point where, and when you say nervous system is regulated, it doesn't mean you're not just calm all the time, because I'm certainly not calm all the time. But your nervous system responds accordingly to life. But like, I finally feel like I'm at a point where my nervous system is where it's supposed to be. I sleep well. All the things that I always sort of dreamed that I wish I could, incorporate, are now, um, you know, a reality. I mean, I feel just good and solid even on a bad day, and we all have plenty of bad days, but it's, you know, bad days back then, like, pale in comparison. You know what I mean? It's like I feel like I can just navigate whatever's coming at me, and there's a lot going on right now. I'm like, thank God I started meditating through like regularly 3 years ago, because there's so much going on in the world right now, and just so much suffering that's being amplified right now, that I feel like I have the tools to just show up and not have it just like crush my soul right now, like just with the political climate and everything else going on. I'm like, all right, like this sucks, but like I got this, you know what I mean? And really to just show up and get everybody else in class to just breathe deep and to work on their nervous system regulation. The physical benefits to the practice are great and all, but very secondary to peace of mind, or at least like feeling calm in one's life. Not just being pushed and pulled by what's happening.
I was going to ask you, as it pertains to your recovery or just recovery in general, but obviously you can speak to your personal experience. What aspects of yoga have you found the most effective for addiction recovery? Was it the physical asana? Obviously, it started with that. You also just
Yeah.
mentioned the breath work, meditation. Is a lot of the yoga philosophy and the books that you read also, are those helpful reminders? Is that part of your like daily thing that you
I mean,
use
it is.
to?
I read like, I don't just stick to all just yogic wisdom. I mean, I love yogic wisdom, but I pretty much dabble in everything now. Yeah, I lean into a lot of just and as we know, like the wisdom's all the same. It's just worded differently, and all these different teachers are saying a lot of the same things, but um, really it is the practice of being present. You know what I mean? Being in the present moment, and that's like the essence of meditation, and it is sort of the essence of just asana and all of that. But like being able to not think for a moment, not just be up in here. And that's the main thing. And one of my, like Alan Watts, one of my favorite teachers, Eckhart Tolle, I leaned into him a lot. You know, Pema Chodron, all of the Buddhist teachings, and the Yoga Sutras and all the yogic wisdom. I mean, I pull it all in. I'm not just, and I think that was a result of sort of, I never, like I said before, I've never been religious. I never went to church. And when I had that spiritual experience that I had when I was younger, I immediately just started looking into all different avenues of different sort of religions, or different sort of ways in which people look at God, if you want to call it that. And, but at the end of the day, for me, it's about changing just how I think. It's like not changing, well, changing how I think. It's not buying into everything that I think. You know what I mean? It's being able to step back. And the type of meditation that I use on the regular now is one that I got straight out of a Pema Chodron book and the Shambhala book, and it's Shamatha. It's basically I sit in the same spot right here pretty much every morning, and it's eyes open, good posture, paying attention to just my exhalation, just the end of my exhalation. And anytime you catch yourself thinking, you call yourself out and you say thinking. You just kind of say thinking when you notice you're off in thought. And what this does over time is it allows you to realize, even when you're not sitting in meditation but just out in the world, when you're just caught up in your thoughts. And so much of suffering is from just overthinking. I mean, it has a lot less to do with actual events hurt, and there's events that are painful, but it's your mind that really amplifies it and makes it worse. So if you can change your relationship with your thoughts and recognize that, like, they're there to kind of get you through life, but you don't have to listen. That's the game changer for me. And in the 8 limb path of yoga, and this is the way the path goes. You start with just trying to be a good person, and that's really the most important. If you can kind of work on your karma and like the ethical practices and the personal practices, if you can just do those and work on those, you're going to do pretty well in life. You know what I mean? When you don't lie, when you don't hurt other people, or do the best you can, when you don't take from other people, when you're try to do things in moderation, more or less, or try to conserve your energy, and you know, um, try to be a little less possessive, your life changes just in and of itself. You know what I mean? And that was sort of one of the realizations I had before I found yoga, with that idea of karma. When I woke up in the hospital, I was like, this is how I'm living my life, you know? Even though I never taken it to this extreme, I realized like I'm getting back what I'm putting out. And so that really like allowed me, because once I stopped fighting with other people, or arguing, or like going to war with other people, my life changed significantly, just in that. And then the physical practice, it's here to like prepare us for, you know, the more subtle practices, the breath work and the meditation. And, it's taken me about, 15, 16 years, but finally I feel like I'm starting to work on that, you know what I mean? And that's how yoga works. It works from the most obvious to the most subtle. And everybody's got their own timeline on how that works, and whether or not, you know, my students show up and just want to work out of the deal, that's great, do you. But like, if you keep coming back and you just breathe, and you try to pay attention to your breath, your life will start to shift without you even knowing it. You know what I mean? So that was a long answer, but like I do lean into a lot of the yogic wisdom about suffering, and suffering as a means to evolve. But I also really enjoy all other wise sages and teachers that have been out there in the world, like their take on the same information, which when you boil it all down, it really speaks to the same stuff.
As as someone who has survived a lot of trauma, especially the childhood trauma that you mentioned, how has yoga helped you rewire your nervous system and support your emotional resilience?
Um, I would say the main way the main way in which it's assisted is just becoming more aware of what I'm doing, becoming more aware of what I'm thinking, just awareness in general. And as we know, like yoga is awareness. It's, our inner light of awareness and consciousness itself, one kind of in the same. But um, the main way it's helped is allowing me to become aware of what I'm doing, so that I can make the appropriate changes when I need to make those appropriate changes, such as not drinking, or, such as, any number of things. But it's really just becoming more self aware. Because otherwise, if you're not aware of what you're doing, that's your reality. You know what I mean? There's no freedom in when you're caught up in your thoughts and like just doing things. I mean, I can justify anything that I want to do. I can make it seem right. But like when you're really aware of how your actions and your words and your thoughts are not just affecting you, but affecting the people around you, that's where the change happens. You know what I mean? Um, and yeah, so I think it's just simple awareness, and it's not simple, but that's the main one. And the awareness to remember to breathe. I mean, I say at the start of every single one of my classes, it's a breath practice. And focus on breathing. And like a lot of times, I'll mention, just if you want to up your game in life, pay attention to your breath, not just when you're in here, but do it throughout your day. And that's one of the things that changed my life too early on, was that the woman who gave me the Reiki, that sort of like gave me the Kundalini experience.
Spontaneous Kundalini.
She
Yeah.
told me to breathe, and this was well before yoga, but she said, throughout your day, as you breathe in, say peaceful mind, and as you breathe out, say open heart. And so I went through a bunch of my life just with all of this anxiety and panic, just saying to myself, peaceful mind, open heart, peaceful mind, open heart. And the funny thing is I feel like, I do believe in intention and like, manifestation. And I feel like that, me saying peaceful mind and open heart early on, and like learning how to breathe while I was saying it, using a mantra essentially, was the like me becoming a yoga teacher, was that sort of, that seed was planted through that. I didn't know about yoga back then at all. It just happened, you know what I mean? But it was my desire, and that was what she said, what do you want in your life, like, what do you want? I said, I want a peaceful mind and I want an open heart. And she said, just say that when you breathe in, say that when you breathe out. And I did it all the fucking time. I mean, I was just like, this is all I was saying inside of my head. And it was like, I was just hoping that, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like taking advice from some new age girl that I was kind of dating. I was like, all right, like, but
Fake it
like,
till
I
you
feel
make
like
it.
what, yeah, exactly. Fake it till you make it. But like looking back, I was like, it was that mantra and that intention that actually somehow led me to do what I'm doing now. And you know what I mean? And it's how it manifested, and you never know how it's going to like play out. But like now this is where I'm at. I have a fairly peaceful mind, and my heart is more open than it was back then. I mean, I was so closed off, and so many, I was like an iron fortress. You couldn't get through to me. You know what I mean? Like, and so, yeah, I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but yeah, it was like, oh, learning how to breathe and like telling people to breathe, not just on their yoga mat. Like, that's the gateway. You know what I mean? It's the gateway to all of it, the gateway from the outer to the inner. And so, that's my job, is to try to like get people to breathe. I tell people that I'm like, my job is to just remind people to breathe,
Hmm.
um, and then good things happen from that point. When you can start to do that, you start to just feel it. And you're like, okay, I can do this.
I do want to circle back to the physical practice of yoga as well, even though that is what most people know about yoga. So it wouldn't be surprising to be talking about the physical practice. But I know many recovery programs focus on the mind and sitting with emotions and learning how to think, in a more conscious way, and having affirmations and surrendering to the divine, and, you know, just developing a lot of that mental resilience. But yoga does bring us in our body, which also, in Ayurveda, we believe that the mind and body are one system. We call it the mind body system. So, how do you feel that the physical practice assists in the healing process, and why the physical integration of learning how to be in your body is so important?
Yeah, and that is, as far as recovery for me, the physicality has to be a part of it. I mean, like, that's why I found like the martial arts and the going to the gym. To me, the physical component is essential. Like, you have to have it, and you have to like reclaim sort of your health in your body, and to be in your body, not just be up in here. Um, so, for recovery, I am a huge, because like early on, I did go to like AA for a little bit, and it was helpful. My mom steered me into it, and it was helpful at first, but I was always sort of just like, wow, everybody's just sitting around drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes and whining about life. And I was always I was the young guy in there, like everybody else was older, and everybody like, but like I was like, I need to be like moving my body, you know what I mean? And so I switched gears and started just training. And to me, that was essential. And so too with the physical practice of yoga. And so too today. I mean, I practice yoga. I ride my bike a lot. And my bike is kind of like church for me, being up in the hills and hill climbing on my bike. But one of the things, so it is essential. And mind body, it being one system, 100%. I learned the hard way, and this was a falling off that I had more recently. This last, like, 3 years ago or whatever, since I've almost 3 years since I've been sober again. But I got into a bike wreck, and tore three of my four rotator cuff tendons, full tears, and couldn't move my arm. I was like, it's hard to teach, let alone practice or do anything. And it was a major surgery that I had to have. And so I was at that point, felt really solid in my life with my sobriety. Um, and I was like, I got this, but it was they said 8 to 12 month recovery. And so basically with tendons, the recovery is a long time. And so what I didn't realize at that point is how much I leaned into physicality in order to stay sober and to sleep well at night. Like a lot of it was me just like tiring myself out so that I would sleep well at night. And like that's a great vice to have, but that in and of itself is a vice. You know what I mean? So when I was sidelined with this shoulder surgery, and then I had access to a lot of pain medication, which I used to have a problem with back in the day. Like pills were another thing, one of the many things that I was taking often. I was like, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. And so I couldn't ride my bike. I couldn't go to yoga. All I could do was walk. And this was 7, 8 months before I could take my first yoga class. Um, and that essentially led to me falling off the wagon again. I remember thinking, oh, I'm almost out of pills. I'm going to have to try to get more pills. And one of the things I used to do when I was younger was like purposely hurt myself so that I could get pain medication. You know what I mean? Just because physical pain to me is like, I can deal with physical pain. I was using it, abusing it, but like I was like, oh shit, how did I get here again? And then I started drinking again, and it just I had a big falling off once again, and it was in a big way, and that's when I decided to go to therapy and like do all these things. But like for me, the physical practice is essential, and just being physical, especially for recovery. Anybody that I talk to that is trying to do what I'm doing, like get in your body, come to yoga, ride your bike, physical. But you can't just rely just on the physical, because what if the physical goes away, and that's what I experienced after well over a decade of just being a seasoned yogi. Still found myself back where I was before as a result of not being able to move my body. That's why I was like, I need to, if I don't start sitting now, then that's on me. Like I have an opportunity here to really do the next step of yoga, which is to sit. And now that's what I do, and it's my main, I would say it's my main practice. Aside, I ride my bike, I do asana,
Dhyana is the next.
I even go to the gym, but really my sitting practice is what holds everything together right now. And God forbid if I hurt myself again, because I do like to go a little crazy on my bike, and I don't want to say I'm reckless, but like I like to push myself, and like I have a plan B in place, or I have a plan A. If I am sidelined, I have my practice. This is my practice. Is this right here, sitting, breathing, being with myself. So yeah, the physical is very important, and I'd say especially initially in
And the
recovery, and I'd say
consistency, right?
especially
You mentioned
yeah, and the
consistently showing up
consistency.
each
Yeah, yeah,
day at the same time. That also
yeah.
grounds you in that routine.
Totally, totally. And it's a daily morning practice. My next phase, and is to sit twice a day now. Once in the morning and once in the evening. And I started to after the new year, and it's kind of fallen off a little bit, but it's fine. I'm not like beating myself up that I'm not sitting twice a day, but yeah, consistency is key in all of this. I mean, consistency is, it's abhyasa and vairagya. It's like that diligent, focused, uninterrupted practice of whatever it is that you're doing, whether it be sitting, whether it be riding your bike, whether it be going to asana. You have to have a routine in place. And whether it be not drinking or not doing drugs, you have to like be consistent. You can't like be like, oh, it's okay today. You gotta have some discipline in
Tapas.
your practice. Tapas, and exactly. And I'm a big fan of tapas. Has always been one of my favorite class themes in my career, because I have so many habits to work with. I feel like I'm just like I'm always like, and then like embracing that like challenge of like doing something hard that's good for me, and trying to take it to the next level. But it's also something that you can't rush, you know what I mean? You have to just like, you know, that's the practice of Santosha too, is like being just okay with where you're at today, even if where you're at today isn't where you want to be, knowing that like if you're just doing this work consistently, that the good things are going to happen. And I've found in my life, like if I show up, if I stick to my guns about my sobriety, show up and help other people, which I do every day. I mean,
That's the
I try
Dharma.
to just,
That's where Dharma comes in,
yeah,
sense of
like when I'm
purpose.
doing these things, like the universe provides whatever it is that I need. And the more I do yoga, the less I need. I don't really need much. My life is so simple compared to how it used to be, like, or how I used to want it to be. Like, I literally have just like my little routines that I do, and I'm like so happy, you know what I mean? And I'm not like doing a lot other than, you know, I just like what I do, but that's the practice of yoga. It's like when you start doing it and you start doing it consistently, you start to really dive inwards. You don't need a lot, you realize that you are whole, you are complete as you are in and of
Hmm.
yourself, and that like that's really where the wealth is it's inside of you already. You don't need a lot to be happy and
Right,
content
right.
in this life. And in fact, it's your mind that's telling you otherwise. You know what
Right,
I
right,
mean?
right. And abundance is actually our natural state. And in Ayurveda, we say disease is the imposter. So it's really important. I know you mentioned AA earlier, and really quick, just because we don't know who's going to be listening to this, there could be listeners tuning into this episode that are actually currently navigating and battling addiction and
Yeah,
in the throes of it. And this this podcast exists for people that are not only wanting to learn about yoga and Ayurveda, but are actually learning the tools, right? So sometimes a podcast is where, or a book is where someone can first learn about these fundamental principles of Ayurveda and yoga. And I really want to speak to those people that are, you know, in that state,
yeah,
deep, in that hole of despair and not knowing what the first step is out of the dark. And
yeah,
I brought you on, Rob, because going to your yoga class, even like the very first time I walked into your yoga class, and how you held the space from the moment the class started was you grounded it with a theme. You went into a dharma talk. You didn't just make it about, let's, yeah, like movement is important, but actually integrating all of the aspects of yoga. You already
mhm,
mentioned meditation, dhyana. You mentioned santosha, contentment. You mentioned dharana, or like uninterrupted focus. You mentioned meditation, or sorry, I already said that. Pranayama, breath work, obviously the asana, which is the physical postures, but integrating everything and your personal journey. I think this is where we meet people. We meet people where they're at, and just assuming maybe their addiction and their what they're addicted to, or what trauma they're going through is different than yours or mine. But the main thing is, people are looking for real tools to get through triggers and prevent themselves from falling back into the old habits, and
yeah,
it can be anxiety inducing to think that, like, oh, a stressful event occurs and all of a sudden that demon is back on the shoulder and telling you, look, we have an easy way out. So I wanted to ask you this question about navigating the triggers, the stressful life
yeah,
events of things that you couldn't necessarily prepare for or see coming, and that happens, and then how you navigate the stress and the triggers, and how you
yeah,
curb that craving in the moment, because those grooves, those samskaras of addiction are very
yeah,
deep, very, very
yeah,
hard to break.
yeah. And well, and you did mention AA, and I'm not knocking. Yeah, I'm not knocking it at all. It actually really saved me, and I needed it, and I leaned into it. What I think I had a hard time with was like the whole sponsor, like it was just my own ego in the way. Like I wasn't willing to do the steps. because I was just hard headed and young and like this person, so that was more on me. But like that program in and of itself is a spiritual program. If you look at it, it is a lot of the things that like, you know, yoga, it doesn't have a physical component to it necessarily, but like the way it's set up is, it works, for me, I really, uh, I left just because, of my own ego at that point in time. Essentially, it was more like I couldn't, nobody could sponsor me because I wouldn't listen to what they were telling me to do. But that's just the Leo in me, and I'm just like, no, I'm not going to do that. You're telling me to do that. But so I don't want to knock it at all. It was very helpful and much needed in my recovery process. But um, yeah, I mean, you know, they also, there is there's a place, I don't know if it's in Colorado. I don't know if I think it's nationwide, but it's Phoenix Multisport, which is sort of they bring a big physical component into sobriety, which is hugely important. And I didn't ever really go there, but I know a lot of people that have, and really it's like climbing, mountain biking, like in a sober setting, getting people together to go do like sports or extreme sports or lifting or CrossFit, and so there are programs like that out there as well that incorporate the physicality, into the practice. I really, for me, was looking for more something with the spiritual component when I fell into yoga, because I had found spirituality, later in life. But I was like, I want to incorporate something that has what I consider to be God involved. And in an AA, they have a higher power. When I first went to AA, they were like higher power, and they were telling me that. I didn't know what they meant. I had no idea. I was like, what? Wait, what? What? And so they're like, yeah, like God. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And so when I first started going, my concept of a higher power was Earth. That's the only thing that I could like wrap my head around that was bigger than I was. You know what I mean? So to circle back, like what exactly were you like as far as just
Navigating the stressful moments of like it's tempting to fall back into that old habit. So what are the best yogic tools to sort of ground you when you feel like you're sort of slipping?
yeah, when I'm sort of slipping, and luckily it's like since had a consistent meditation practice, I am so aware, and it's only been maybe once or twice in the last 3 years that I've actually been like, oh wow, this is where I think I probably would have started to go like that route. You know what I mean? Like there was some awareness about like, and really what it was like this feeling in my chest that comes up. You know what I mean? It's like this like anxiety that comes up about whatever it is that I was contending with in that moment. But in those moments, for me now, I have all of these tools in my tool belt. When I am having a bad day and I'm feeling like triggered, um, I'm like, get on my bike, just go ride, get outside, take a walk, go to a yoga class. I just force myself to go do something, you know what I mean? But also, I've gotten really good at like sitting and allowing myself to feel that sensation in my chest. You know what I mean? The physical, I get on my bike, I go to asana, I burn off the crazy, you know what I mean? But like I've found an appreciation for when I feel triggered to um, to sit with it, to just sit with it, and to actually, much like I did when I would have panic attacks, and I could like feel that one was coming on. Like when I feel that, and like I said, it's few and far between. I just sit down somewhere and literally let myself feel the sensations that are happening in my chest. I am like fully just with those sensations, with an understanding that those sensations are going to come to pass. You know what I mean? They're not going to be there forever. And through the practice of pratyahara and like being able to like, it's like a desirable effect for me now. When I'm feeling like shitty, I like to feel it. I like to feel shitty, you know, like I just let myself like be like, okay. And understanding that sensation is sensation in your body. It's your mind that's telling you whether it's good or bad. You know what I mean? And so it's that deep recognition through repetition, through practice, through sitting and being and consciously sitting in discomfort that like when it happens, I'm like, I just sit with it and then I let it do. I will get on my bike and do this, that, or other, but I really enjoy now on some level, like allowing myself to transmute that or to like change it into something else and to let it sort of dissipate and let it do its thing. And, sometimes you still react. And I'm a reactive person, but like I've gotten to a point where I'm like, okay, like pause, take a moment and like sit with it, And so that's really it. It's like, it's through this practice, just understanding like me, understanding myself and how it works and how I am a sensitive person. I am a very feeling individual. And that's what I've realized is because I'm a Cancer as well, sun sign, Cancer Leo, on the cusp, but also I have a lot of Leo. And so like I do feel things. And what I realized like my journey through drugs and alcohol and my alcoholism and my addictions were all born out of um, my 100% unwillingness to feel emotional pain. I was unable to like let myself feel. And when I finally realized that that's what I needed to do, that's what I do now is I like literally just let myself feel it and it changes, but like, I would tell people do like get out, find some sort of physical outlet to do that, but don't lean on just the physicality. And I am a huge proponent of therapy, and that's the svadhyaya, that self-study. I mean, it's having a different set of eyes to be able to look at what you're justifying or what you're not like still willing to look at, even if you think you're the most self-aware person in the world, which I kind of did for a while. I'm like, I'm very aware. I know who I am, but like going to therapy really changed a lot of that for me. And I understood like what it was about my growing up with and I love my mom and I didn't really like my father figures, but my mom had her own issues too. And I really understand how that shaped what I am today. And it's like in all of my relationships, I understand sort of why I do the things that I do more so now. So I don't think it's any one thing. I mean, yoga and meditation for awareness, but being aware is really like, I think the most important thing is just being willing to look at yourself, and being willing to look at your circumstances and being willing to look at what has transpired in your life to make you do the things that you do. You got to have a desire to want to know why you do the things that you do. But like, I think yoga does that. This is part of the practice. Physical, absolutely. I mean, I think people, you need to like get your body back. You got to get your physical health back, and you have this outlet to like sort of help you sleep at night, to tire you out, for lack of a better way to put it, like, but also, so it's like it's all of it. But when I can honestly say that since I feel like these last 3 years of just sitting every day and like doing this work, like that stuff doesn't come up anymore. It just doesn't. Even like things that usually used to push my buttons, um, I can feel. I'm like, you know what? I don't need to go there. Like I don't. It's not that big of a deal. You know what I mean? Like I'm okay.
What I hear is that you've developed a capacity for true intimacy with yourself.
Yeah.
Isn't that what it comes
I
down
fucking
to?
love myself
Yeah.
anymore, And I always never did, like I always hated myself. And I've gotten to a point, and I spent a lot of time alone in these last few years. I spent, a good 2 years, I became a ghost. I like stopped going out. I stopped being social, and I really just like wanted to work on myself. And I got to a point where I just like being by myself. I really don't, I like enjoy my company so much. And it's interesting because now I'm finally in a relationship, which I didn't ever think. I honestly thought I was going to become a monk. Like I was like, you know what? I
An
don't think
ascetic.
you're meant. Yeah, I was like, I don't think you're meant to. I think you're supposed to be like this
Bri-
monk, and you're supposed to just teach yoga. And like all of a sudden, when I get to this point where I really just like to be by myself, and I really like my routines, and I wasn't looking really, it just happened, and now I'm like, and I would say for me, like that's like where and they've been really small challenges, but that's where most of my triggers come up with when it comes to matters of the heart, because it all relates back to my relationship with my mom growing up, and like all the stuff that happened, and all like the heartache. What I realized in one of my previous relationships when I fell off the wagon this last time was what I was feeling when I right before I fell off the wagon, and my therapist helped me realize this feeling that I would get in my chest was the exact same feeling that I had in my chest when I was a kid, when my mom didn't come home at night, when she was out all night and I couldn't track her down because we didn't have phones. And I always thought she was gonna die, and like this was my life. Like I was like wondering where she was, and she was just dealing with her own shit, and it gave me this sort of like feeling in my chest that I feel it when I'm in a relationship now, and that's the biggest trigger for me, and I guess that's probably why I thought maybe I wanted to become a monk, is because it's safe, you know what I mean? It's like I don't have that, I don't have anybody to like get that little bit of a rise out of me, but like um but I'm just aware of it, I'm aware like, okay, like oof, like I think relationships, I think we all know, can be one of the biggest triggers for people in on the spiritual path, or trying to be sober, or whatever it is. And AA, I think they say when you're trying to get sober, you shouldn't be in a relationship for X amount of time, because for that reason, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, like um, I feel like I'm in a good place with it all, just as far as like knowing this about myself, and that's the awareness. It's like I know, and I know that like when I get that feeling, it's like that's what it is. It's like these old conditioned, almost cellular, responses that come up that were the exact same things that were happening when I was a child. I just didn't know what anxiety was or what any of that was. When you're a kid, you don't know about that stuff. You just think that's your life.
In Ayurveda, we
um,
say that the chest is the storehouse of sorrow. That's
Yeah,
where
I
sorrow
believe it. I
lives.
believe it. Yeah, yeah, and and there's a lot of it, and yeah, my mom passed away like I think 7 years ago now, and that was like that was a big sort of um, rite of initiation of some sort for me. It was like this. It was my worst fears that came true. It was very unexpected. I was there when it happened, and like it like yeah, I was able to sort of like put everything together, I don't know. It was like, it was a big
Full
moment. It
circle
was a big
moment.
moment. Yeah, full circle moment. And, and she, yeah, you know, she, she like, you know, she made this all possible, like, yeah, I know that when she passed, that she was like stoked because she knew that I was going to be okay, like she saw like the change that came about from doing this practice. You know, she gave me the money to do the first teacher training, and she said, "You better fucking do something with this." You know,
And you are, Rob.
did not expect that. But yeah, you know, like it was like I don't know, it was just this realization. She was like, I know she was like cool, you know, like he's gonna be okay. Like she saw me teach at the Hanuman festival, and I was like, she never did yoga, but she came and watched, and she was like, holy shit, like I can't believe like this guy basically came from the dead, came from jail and almost fucking died, and like here he is now leading 100 however many people in this big class, and she was just like happy that like she was able to like help me figure it out, you know. Anyways.
Mm,
Oof.
let the tears flow.
Yeah, yeah, I haven't really cried about her in a while. I was just came out of nowhere,
Told you,
but
Ojas Oasis
yeah,
is a safe space. That's the grace of going in with an intention of allowing you to be held, right? You always hold the space for everyone else. So it's an honor to do the same for you.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I know she's probably just looking down now wherever she is now, just being like, yeah, you know, like, but all the way to circle back, I feel like it's all divinely orchestrated, you know, like I know like karmic connections and not just this life's karma, but you know, karma in general. And, you know, I feel like I'm like finally like burning off a lot of the karma that I've created through lifetimes at this point, you know what I mean? And who knows what's gonna happen as far as like, you know, where this leads in this life or the next, but like I know I'm on the right path, you know what I mean? And if I just keep doing what I'm doing and just keep doing my own work, really, I mean, a lot of this teaching yoga for me is about me being able to continue to practice, you know, to create a life that I can like do all this stuff, you know, and then share it with others, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's a wild ride.
Mm,
Uh, love every minute of it. All the good stuff, all the bad stuff, and all the ugly stuff. It all fits in, you know. And you just got to be open to the lessons and you know open to just whatever life is gonna bring your way. Yeah,
the great alchemy of life, right? If you so choose to turn the stuff, the pain, the things, the shadow, the ego, integrating all of that, looking at the inner child, looking at the parents, the good, the bad, the ugly, the unforgivable things, right? The neglect, all the things, all the trespasses, all the betrayals. And if you
yeah.
can sit with
I'm
those,
grateful for like all of it,
right?
you know, which is funny. Like you know, all the shitty stuff is like the best stuff,
Oh,
you
it
know,
can
and it's
be,
hard.
but
It
there's an
can
alchemy to it. There's like a
yeah,
recipe.
so
Hmm.
yeah, there is a recipe. It's not, but you know, you got to be willing to see it as the opportunity that it is. You know.
You got to be willing to go through the process of the alchemy, which is going to require being in some pain and
Yeah.
not
Exactly.
avoiding or diluting or, like belittling it. And I think what you just moved through just 1 minute ago, I
Yeah.
didn't want to interrupt that because you were going through a moment and I was like, okay, here we are. We're being visited. Here's a visitor.
Yeah.
This is something, some entity wanted to come and you sat with it and you processed it in real time. I got to witness that, and that was really beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Appreciate that.
What an honor to bear witness to somebody else's, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. I
real
mean,
self. Like
yeah.
not just the face that you present on a great day and a great when everything's going well, but some real stuff. And when we talk about our moms, I mean, don't even get me. I'm in Vedic astrology. I'm a Cancer rising, and
Okay.
yeah, so I know all about the tears. I know all
Yeah.
about the tears for mom and um the reverence for mom and what the mother represents in our heart,
Right. Yeah.
it's deep.
Yeah. Yeah. You know. make her proud.
Mm.
And
She is proud.
yeah,
She's
yeah,
very proud of you.
thanks.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm excited for whatever's next. Like I just, I don't. Who knows how this is all gonna pan out? But I just know that, like, yeah, I'm on the right path. And um, there's not a lot out there right now with all the tools and all the work that I've done that's gonna like cause me to fall off again. It doesn't mean I got to be vigilant and I got to pay attention, but like I feel like um, everything's going to turn out okay, even with whatever happens. I'm going to be all right. I have um, you know soul. The soul lives on. Um, and so
I have a good friend who is actually in my first yoga teacher training, who teaches yoga classes in jails. She brings this
yeah,
practice, these tools to people who are living life behind bars. And what an amazing place to bring yoga, right?
so important. Yeah, I mean, I did that for a short little time. Early on, and yeah, and then I don't know. Have you ever seen the documentary, The Dama Brothers? It's a good one. Yeah, it's I saw it a long time ago, but it was like it was sort of it's just about like they brought a vipassana meditation into a high security prison in Alabama. All these people that inmates that wanted to participate, and they just followed like the story and how everything in the prison shifted as a result of these people sitting and like being and doing this sort of work. I feel like it's important. It would be great, but I feel like there's a lot less in like the jail systems, a lot less about rehabilitation and allowing people to like do this kind of work. Unfortunately, because they eventually quashed it, because it was like helping people too much, I guess. But I feel like everybody should be privy to like these tools. I mean, then the Dalai Lama came to Boulder like I don't know 6 7 years ago, and I saw him speak. One of the things he said, which would change this world for the better, um, would change everything on planet Earth, is if they started to bring mindfulness into young school age kids, like introduce these sort of coping mechanisms like breathing and even if you don't call it meditation or you don't call it yoga, but like use the same wisdom, call it something else if you need to, but like that would be one of the biggest things that would change planet Earth, is to introduce this wisdom to people at a young age so they don't just reach for a bottle, or they don't just reach for their phone, or they don't just reach for this. They have some real life tools to keep them in their body, and and I believe that to be true. It's just unfortunate that like that's not the way this world works right now. Like too many people that think that yoga is a cult, you know what I mean, or just something that's way too esoteric to like introduce into school age kids, you know what I mean, um, or jails for that matter, or penitentiaries. I mean, I feel like you know, one of the things they brought up about in this documentary was like these guys that were like offenders of violent crimes and all of this stuff, like actually started to realize and become aware that they were part responsible for what they did. Like a lot of people think it's okay because of the way that like they were brought up, and like this is just their life, and to be able to like to have these people have this sort of clarity, like to have some to take responsibility for their actions, you know what I mean, and that's what they were seeing was happening, as well as less violence in the whole prison and everything else that was just good, but that's why I think we were talking about it, like it's like keeping the wisdom of yoga and not letting it get diluted and not letting it get watered down and not letting it just fade into nothingness as we move into whatever the future is going to hold here with all the AI and not real reality going on out there is to like, I mean, I've
Not
joked
real
with people
reality.
that like,
Yeah,
yeah, like
it's all
I
Maya,
I've joked,
honestly. All the separateness is an illusion, right? We know that, but it's
yeah,
getting really far out now. Like
where so
the
many people
illusion's
aren't in
getting
their
really,
bodies.
really
I mean, like
developed.
the further down the pipeline we go right now, to me, feels like the more and more important that this practice is going to be for people. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
As a, like a lifeline to keep people in their bodies right where they are, to keep people grounded, and you know, to be able to um, see clearly. You know what I mean? See clearly,
And tether
and
us to what is real. Tether us to
yeah,
the
yeah,
earth and the ground and the earth element, because when that earth element isn't strong, that's when people have the panic attacks, the propensity to reach for something to calm them down instantaneously, whether that is um, a bottle of pills or a bottle of alcohol or something else. There are many different forms of addiction, and I feel that uh, everyone has their own thing that's available to them. Again, it's there's such an array of things now that you can use to not be in your body or not feel what you're feeling. And the practice of yoga, the practice of Ayurveda, the knowledge, that's what we want people to awaken and realize actually it's just a matter of knowledge and empowering yourself with this knowledge and then practicing it consistently. And I also, we didn't go too much into the community aspect, but I also think that the yoga community is pretty gosh darn incredible. The people in our community,
yeah,
wow,
yeah, yeah. I mean,
amazing.
I feel lucky to be around so many people working on themselves in some way, shape, or form, whatever that looks like. Yeah, I mean, community is hugely important. You know, people sort of the same like minds trying to like accomplish some goal. You know, um, yeah, and that is huge. I mean, I feel like you know they welcomed me in a while back, and like I luckily had some teachers early on that told me to keep coming regardless of how I feel, and you know, and so I just somehow, you know, at even with the imposter syndrome coming in as a student and a teacher, just kept showing up, and now it's just become like, you know, my reality. I'm just around people that like do good work, you know, which I feel I don't take lightly. You know, it's a gift.
There's something really special about practicing yoga also in a classroom, in a studio versus by yourself. And there's a time and place for both, by the way. Like there's self
Yeah,
practice is amazing and beautiful, but there's something very amazing, the vibration, the frequency that's created by a room of people that are all in like syncing together their breath and their movement and chanting om and just clearing out all the debris, all the energetic debris, and we're doing it together in uh in unison and in this solidarity almost of like we all came in probably with some shit that's going on in our lives that we are looking to gain clarity on or just clear that, transmute that energy into something good and clear and peaceful. And having people around you in a room doing that same thing with that same intention, it adds power, it adds prana to the
yeah,
practice.
it's profound. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I feel it. I get to feel it at pretty much on the
Yep.
regular. Yeah, there's something really profound too when you have like, you know, a large group of people that are all, you know, end of the day, and the energy's just buzzing, you know, and everybody's like, ah, and then like everybody stops and gets quiet for a minute, and you feel like 50 individuals' energies just drop. It's like really, really cool to feel. The start of class, the end of class, while you're moving through class, but like, it's one of my favorite things at the end of teaching a spirited vinyasa flow, you know, to have the music at the end fade out, and to just have it be completely quiet, and everybody can feel it. Everybody can feel it. It's like, oh wow, like it's like you don't realize how noisy everything is until you get quiet. And yeah, it's one of my favorite things is to feel a group energy sync up and then drop in. It's so
And you,
cool.
as the seasoned yoga teacher, too, are the one creating that divine permission for us all to do that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
you.
it's cool. I mean, I love it. I mean, I don't know.
Superpower.
Yeah, like I said, I joke that I don't know how I got here, but I kind of know how I got
Yeah.
here.
Oh,
But
we
I
know.
think,
We just spent an hour and a half
yeah,
crystallizing
totally talking
exactly
about
how you
how we got
became
here.
this
But
teacher that you are.
but yeah,
Through
I,
the mud, the lotus has risen. Yeah.
yeah, definitely feel lucky that I was able to like look at the lessons that I had to look at and like did the work or still continue to do the work that I need to do in order to keep doing this. You know what I mean? This is my life. And you even, I think, said you were like, wow, you really live your yoga. And I was like, my job and my life are one and the same. It's like I go in and teach, but while I'm here or while I'm anywhere, I'm always practicing
Mm.
yoga. It's not just on my mat. It's not just when I sit on my meditation cushion, but it is every moment of the day. I'm like in it, you know what I mean? And that's what it is, that's life. And I get to do this and get to try to change lives. And like I said there, and you said there is a lot of science coming out, and I think that's the great thing is there's so much more science behind Ayurveda and yoga that before it seemed like it was just woo woo this that and the other, but there's actually science behind it, and that's like I think one of the things, I'll just say this, like early on when I had that sort of spiritual experience was I was given a book. It was a Deepak Chopra book, and it was something like it was about harnessing the infinite power of
Mm.
coincidence. And I read this book and it just spoke to me. And but what spoke to me about this book was it had mantra in it, it had all this yogic wisdom in it, but it had quantum physics and it had a lot of science in it. And that's what I needed at that point. Like I was like, oh wait, like this is like it's not just this, but there's people studying this and this is like real. It's not just like. And so that was one of when I told you I was like handing people out books. I bought like 10 copies of this book. I'm like, you gotta read this book, gotta read this book. But that's what it is. There's science behind it. And I look to learn more about the science behind it, but I feel like I've lived it, so I just
It's
know
in
that
your
like I
cells.
don't need
Yeah.
I don't need to know the science to know that it works. You know what I mean? I know if you just sit down and do the work assigned to you, and we all have different work to do in this lifetime. We all have different traumas and losses and ups and downs, but when we like decide we want to do that work, it works. You know what I mean?
And we're all different. I think there's something to also be said about different types of teachers and the way you teach yoga versus how I teach yoga versus how another great yoga, like every yoga teacher, every teacher in general has their unique talent, gift, life experience to source from. Some will want to pick up more on the anatomy, some will want to pick up more on like the breathing or just there's multitudes of ways, but to yeah, there everyone is going to have a different type of teacher who speaks to them, and I really tend to gravitate toward the wisdom type centered science, the wisdom science of yoga, which that's why I was so drawn to that's why I keep coming back to your classes, because you are teaching it from a very clear sense of experience, not just theory. And that is what wisdom is. It's someone who is embodying the words that they're speaking, and you didn't like it's not just reading straight out of which is great, by the way, to chant a mantra or a shloka or a sutra that you memorize, or a singing mantras before class. These are amazing, beautiful ways of tapping into a frequency. But I love the authentic teachers who have been to hell and back and are proof that you can get through the hardest aspects of life. You can get through it. Um, and you can get through it with not running away from yourself and not running away from the discomfort and everything that you everything that you cue in the classes. I love how you cue. I think cues are probably some of the most important aspects of going to a yoga class. Just, yeah, just like very, very subtle ones. You can even mention one or two of your favorite ones right now if you want. And then I can just like revel in them. If
Some of my favorite cues.
yes.
I mean, oh God, uh,
Like in
I don't even.
Shavasana or getting
Yeah,
into Shavasana.
getting into shavasana,
How would
huh?
you cue
I
me right now
mean,
to get into Shavasana? No, not to put you on the spot. I want to get into corpse pose after this and just
yeah.
be like, ah.
Well, and that's the thing. That's the thing about like how how you're saying every. It's like when the cues aren't going to be powerful until you embody the cues. You know what I mean? So too with wisdom.
True.
It's like you can read it out of a book, or you can just memorize cues. But once you feel something in your body, or once you feel something in your soul, and you can speak to it, then it's transmitted. You know what I mean? And so I always, I mean, especially as an early on teacher, I always like anytime I heard a cue that made sense, I was like, all right, I'm gonna take this, and then also to try to find the different ways to say the same thing. You know what I mean? And it's just sort of the same with like yogic wisdom or any wisdom. It's like it's all saying the same stuff. It's just different points of view, different sort of people transmitting the same wisdom, and it's all And I would say it boils down to the the first two yamas, which is do trying not to hurt other people and being honest. You know what I mean? And trying to see things clearly and trying to do the least amount of harm. And I feel like that's the most important. Out of all of it,
Mm.
be a good person.
Hmm.
Do the best you can, anyways. Put your best foot forth.
You said something the other day in class that was, you used the word paradoxical or oxymoronic about the way that we were.
Fist of peace.
Sorry.
Right? Was it the fist
Yes,
of
the
peace?
fists
Or,
of peace.
yeah, yeah. I didn't know if I was using that word
You were
word
using it correctly.
oxymoron.
Yes, yes, yes. Because it doesn't sound like something. Oh, fist. You think anger, right? You think aggression, but you cued it so well because you were like, speaking to how that was like obviously it was paradoxical. It was ironic that a fist of what do you mean a fist of peace? What is that? But you spoke to it, and it worked. And I could tell
Yeah,
you were channeling that.
I feel like it's even more and more like just regarding like fist and peace and like why people are like, why are there, if it's non-harming, why are there warrior poses,
Right.
or this, that, and the other? But it's really um, you know seeing things from a place of truth. You know what I mean? Seeing things clearly and accurately, and cutting through the veil of whatever that you have to cut through. It's like you know there's a lot going on right now where people are up in arms, and it's like satyagraha. It's like like I'm doing a lot of protesting right now, and it's like I'm kind of like riled up, and there's this element as a yogi, you have to like you have to, I guess, push back a little bit on things that need to be pushed back on. It's not just passive. It's not just all peace and love. I mean, you want to do the least amount of harm, but you have to like do what's right at the same time. And like I learned how to fight for self defense. You know what I mean? Like, and I did that because I felt like I had to, because I got hurt. You know what I mean? And it's like, so it's like you got to be able to take care of yourself, and you got to be able to take care of your people. And do what's right for the greater good. And it's, I don't know, there's just a lot going on out there right now where um, you know. But I will say this: 2016, I was way more riled
Mm.
up, and but I was also like using a little bit back then too, and I was like really um, not. I wasn't right use of energy. I wasn't right use of energy. I wasn't like, focusing on what I needed to focus on. I was focusing on just, and then, it boils down to just awareness again. It's like, what do I need to like do to keep myself feeling regulated and strong and okay, but still able to like help without,
Without
um,
accruing
so
karma,
I don't
without
know.
accruing more karma. That's the key.
Yeah, exactly, and it's peaceful protest, but like, um, but yeah, I mean, it's not just you gotta get your hands dirty sometimes, it's not just all. That's one of the things that like I alluded to before is like, you know, toxic positivity. It can be a thing in just like a way in which people like sort of cope with life. It's like just, but like that's not how life
Like
works. You
bypassing
have to.
struggle with just only the blinders are on and you're not looking at the ugly underbelly of reality.
Yeah,
It's
you got to get
important.
in there and you got to do it and you got to speak to it,
Hmm.
just like death. I speak it to death a lot, and it's like such a taboo thing, but it's like it's life's common denominator, and we have to look at it. And it's a big part of just about any spiritual practice is understanding this on a deep level. That this is where we're going. You know what I mean?
It's
And
quite a big part of life, isn't it? Is death.
it
We're
is,
always
it is. I
in
mean,
each moment. I mean, you could say it with every exhale, right? Or
yeah,
every
yeah,
time we go to sleep, or every time a
yeah.
season changes.
Anytime you have a breakup or
Yeah,
anytime, it's like, is
many
this,
deaths
yeah,
in
this is
life.
nature. Yeah.
Mm.
So,
Well, Rob, I feel like that's a great place to conclude is on death and rebirth and the cycles. And, we continue to revisit these themes in yoga. Uh, it never gets old. We're never the same people. I mean, in a year from now, we're going to have a whole another year of reference and seeing how the political climate does play out, seeing just again, and that's just one aspect of our culture, but it's a very volatile current aspect of our culture, which can become very toxic to fixate on or over consume, just like anything else, right? We eat. It's weird to think about, but like even eating too many like vegetables, like that's too much fiber, and your body could just not be able to digest that many greens or that much roughage or salad, whatever. Same with dairy, which is very nourishing. So we have to be careful about how much we're consuming, how much we're spinning ourselves in these spirals of doomsday and apocalyptic type also, just to like get back to the goal with yoga is neutralizing the constant changing. I think you read the first or second sutra a lot to us. um what yoga is like, this is a technique, which has been tested through thousands of years, tried and true, again and again, no matter who has been in power or what country's at war or what you're going through. This is a way to neutralize the mind and get yourself to a place where if you must act, right, this is the true warrior mind. If you must act, you're ready, you're prepared, right? But doing it from a place of neutrality and knowing, in not out of emotional like upset, but actually, no, I know what I'm doing, I'm consciously doing this, if I have to fight, I will. And engaging in that battle, just like Arjuna, right, in the Bhagavad Gita, he didn't want to. He had to be, again, convinced again and again.
yeah, it comes. I think that's what it's like, the steer and the sukha.
Mm,
It's the effort and the ease. It's that balance. But I like what you said about tried and true. Like this has been going on forever, and there's been lots of wars and lots of major events, and but you know the present moment's always been here. Atha yoga anyasasanam. This now we're doing the work right now, and it's like
This
coming
is
back to
yoga.
that consistently. And, yeah, that's where it's all at. This is where all the wisdom of yoga is born out of, it's just the ever present now and being able to like see it and exist in it and, be in it and not always be,
Of it.
you know, yeah. So,
Exactly.
but
There
yeah.
we go. Amen. That's a wrap.
Amen.
That's a wonderful place to conclude. Rob, thank you so much for coming
Yeah,
on.
Sasha, I really appreciate you putting me on here and having me on here. Yeah, I'll see you in class soon, probably,
Definitely.
hopefully.
Definitely.
All right. Well, enjoy your day.
You too. Thank you so much
And
for
see you
sharing your
soon.
story and
Yeah, of course.
everything that you
Hope
do.
it helps a person or two.
It will. Most definitely.
Awesome. All right. I'll see you soon. Thanks,
Thank
Sasha.
you. Thank you for listening to Ojas Oasis with Sasha Bershadsky. To learn more about Ayurvedic healing, please visit ojasoasis.com. We'll see you next time, and until then, have your smile.